Hello, dear friends. My name is Tatiana, and we have an English lesson today. It is week number 3, and we are going to read the text first and discuss uh, articles in this text and also the rules and do some practical exercises. So then we are going to discuss quantifiers and uh, superlatives also at the end. So, and comparatives, superlatives and comparatives. So let's start with articles, and we are going um, yeah, to read about very interesting topic. Uh, Space and cosmos and uh, going to space. So, and I'm going to show you the text itself, which we are going to read together and discuss. So, first, let's discuss uh, the questions. Who was the first man to set foot on the moon? What do you think about it? Yuri Gagarin, Buzz Aldrin, or Neil Armstrong? So was Neil Armstrong. When did he land on the moon? In 1959, in 1969, or in 1979? It happened in 1969. What was the first thing he said when he landed? A. Wow, it's too big. B. I'm floating in a most peculiar way. C. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. So the right answer is C. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. So, what controversy has there been since then about what Neil Armstrong actually said? Why is the missing A so important? So, let's start reading. One small word, one big difference in meaning. As Neil Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon, a global audience of 500 million people were watching and listening. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. They heard him say as he dropped from the ladder of his spacecraft to make the first human footprint on the lunar surface. It was the perfect quote for such a momentous occasion. But from the moment he said it, people have argued about whether the NASA astronaut got his lines wrong. Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, who stepped outside a few seconds after him, landed the Apollo 11 spacecraft on the moon on the 20th of July 1969. In the tense 6 hours and 40 minutes between landing on the moon and stepping out of the capsule, Armstrong wrote what he knew would become some of the most memorable words in history. Armstrong has always insisted that he wrote one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind, which would have been a more meaningful and grammatically correct tense. Without the missing "a", the intended meaning of the sentence is lost. In effect, the line means that's one small step for mankind, means humanity, one giant leap for mankind. But did he really say the sentence incorrectly? Until now, Armstrong himself had never been sure if he actually said what he wrote. In his biography, First Man, he told the author James Hansen, I must admit that it doesn't sound like the word air is there. On the other hand, certainly the air was intended, because that's the only way it makes sense. But now, after almost 4 decades, the spaceman has been vindicated. Using high tech sound analysis techniques, Peter Shanford, an Australian computer expert, has discovered that the air was spoken by Armstrong, but he said it so quickly that it was inaudible on the recording, which was broadcast to the world. Mr. Ford's findings have been presented to a relieved Mr. Armstrong. James Hansen said, Neil is a modest guy, but I think it means a lot to him to know that he didn't make a mistake. So, as we read, yeah, the missing air was very important. So, the controversy was about what Neil Armstrong actually said when he landed on the moon. Did he say one small step for man or one small step for a man? The "a" is important because the sentence makes good sense if it one small step for an individual man, but a giant leap for humans in general. Without the article, the sentence doesn't make sense, as it means one small step for people in general, one giant leap for people in general. So, and let's understand why the following names and numbers are mentioned. It's exercise 1C. The 20th of July 1969. So it was the date of the first moon landing. 6 hours and 40 minutes is the time the astronauts spent in the spacecraft between landing on the moon and stepping out of the capsule. 500 million people watched or listened to the moon landing live. Buzz Aldrin was the second man to step on the moon. First Man is the name of Armstrong's biography. James Hansen is the author of his biography. Peter Shanford is the computer expert who discovered through sound analysis that Armstrong really did say the air. So, and now let's complete the sentences making words from the words in bold. What do they mean? Exercise 1D. Armstrong made the first human footprint on the lunar surface. Yeah, coming from footprint. His first words were, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," which means people in general or humanity. 3. It was the perfect word for such a momentous occasion. Momentous, very important or serious. 4. One small step for a man would have made it a more meaningful, meaningful sentence. Meaningful, having a clear meaning. 5. They were possibly the most memorable words in history. Memorable, worth remembering. 6. Armstrong said the S so quickly that it was audible on the recording. Audible means can't be heard. So, and we have some sentences to correct. Just a moment, we have to rotate this view. Yeah, Exercise 2 articles, yeah? So Neil Armstrong was born in the USA. True, correct. 2. He was a shy boy who loved the books and the music. A shy boy, correct. The books and the music, not correct. He was a shy boy who loved books and music. 3. He studied aeronautical engineering at the university. The university is not correct. He studied aeronautical engineering at university. 4. He was the first man who set foot on a moon. Not correct. He was the first man who set foot on the moon. 5. His famous words were heard by people all over the world. Correct. 6. Before becoming an air astronaut, he worked for the US Navy. Not correct. Before becoming an astronaut, he worked for the US Navy. Correct. 7. Since 1994, he has refused to give the autographs. Not correct. Since 1994, he has refused to give autographs. 8. In 2005, he was involved in a lawsuit with an ex-barber who tried to sell some of the Armstrong's hair. Not correct. In 2005, he was involved in a lawsuit with an ex-barber who tried to sell some of Armstrong's hair without the. So let's come back. Let's go to the rules about the articles and the exercises. Let's rotate with the view clockwise. Articles. So, our grammar. So, you should be familiar already with the basic rules for using articles, but this is an area that can be very difficult for some of us, as long as we don't have articles in Russian language. So, the basic rule, yeah, and some other exceptions. So, basic rules. A, an, there and no article. My neighbor has just bought a dog. The dog is an Alsatian. He got into the car and drove to the town hall. 2. Men are better at parking than women. I don't like sport or classical music. I stayed at home last weekend. So the rule number 1, you have to use a or an when you mention somebody or something for the first time, or say who, what, somebody, something is. Use the when it's clear who or what somebody, something is. For example, it has been mentioned before or it's unique. Rule number 2. This is a rule which very often has mistakes. Don't use an article to speak in general with plural and uncountable nouns, or in phrases like at home, at work, go home, go to bed, next week, last week, etc. So, for institutions like church, hospital, school, etc. My father's in hospital. They are building a new hospital in my town. With prison, church, school, hospital, and university, etc. Don't use an article when you are thinking about the institution and the normal purpose it is used it for. If you are just thinking about the building, use a or there. For example, I'm studying at university means I'm a student there. The university is in the center of town. We are talking about the buildings. I go to church every Sunday. The murderer is in prison. No definite article. Other words which are used like this are college, mosque, synagogue, and other places of worship. Talking about geographical names. Tunisia is in North Africa. Selfridges, one of London's biggest department stores, is in Oxford Street. Lake Victoria and Mount Kilimanjaro are both in Africa. The river Danube flows into the Black Sea. The National Gallery and the British Museum are London tourist attractions. So, this means that we don't normally use the with. 1. Most countries, continents, regions ending with the name of a country, continent. For example, North America, Southeast Asia, islands, states, provinces, towns, and cities. Exceptions are the USA, the UK, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, the Czech Republic. 2. Roads. Yeah, we don't normally use the with roads, streets, parks, shops, and restaurants. Exceptions are motorways and numbered roads, the M6, the A25. 3. We don't normally use the with individual mountains and lakes, but we normally use the with mountain ranges, rivers, seas, canals, deserts, and island groups. We normally use the with the names of theaters, cinemas, hotels, galleries, and museums. So, you should already have a good instinct for whether you need to use there or not. And also, the easiest way to internalize the rules is by learning and remembering a clear example. Yeah, for example, Fifth Avenue, the River Nile, the Mediterranean Sea, Mount Everest or just Everest, the Andes, etc. So let's do the exercises. We need to rotate twice. Yeah. So the first part 6a, exercise A, circle the correct article. For example, James bought a new suit at the weekend. Number 1. The weather was awful, so we stayed at home. 2. The dishwasher we bought last week has stopped working already. I love reading historical novels. 4. Sarah had had an exhausting day, so she went to bed early. 5. My boyfriend drives a very cool sports car. 6. The teachers are on strike, so the children aren't going to school. 7. Turn left immediately after the church and go up the hill. 8. My neighbor's in prison because he didn't pay his taxes. 9. People are complaining because the council have refused to build a new hospital. 10. Visitors will not be allowed to enter the hospital after 7 p.m. In exercise B on the right, you need to complete with there or nothing. For example, they are going to the USA to visit family. 1. I think Sicily is the largest island in the Mediterranean. 2. Cairo is on the River Nile. 3. We didn't have time to visit the Louvre when we were in Paris. 4. Southwest England is famous for its beautiful countryside and beaches. 5. Mount Everest is in the Himalayas. 6. The largest inland lake is the Caspian Sea. 7. We stayed at the Palace Hotel while we were in Madrid. 8. Romeo and Juliet is on at the Globe Theatre. 9. The Channel Islands are situated between England and France. 10. I've always wanted to visit India. Okay, so let's come back to our text. Yeah, and we have 3 more extracts from some famous historical speeches. Yeah, and we need to complete them with a, an, or nothing, or there. Yeah, so Winston Churchill, 1874 to 1965, was the British Prime Minister during the Second World War. In this extract from a speech given in 1946, the year after the war ended, Churchill first used the phrase Iron Curtain to describe the boundary which ideologically and physically divided the East and the West. This speech marked the beginning of the Cold War. So, we are going to choose the articles for it. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the world, of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe: Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, Bucharest, and Sofia. All these famous cities and the populations around them lie in what I must call the Soviet sphere. Next, Martin Luther King, 1929 to 1968, was a leader of the American civil rights movement who was assassinated in Memphis in April 1968. In this extract from a speech made in 1963, King spoke of his dream of a future when all people would be treated equally. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And King Edward VIII 1894 to 1872, was the was the only British king ever to abdicate. Edward had been king for only 11 months when he announced his decision to give up the throne in order to marry an American divorcee, Wallace Simpson. The following is an extract from the Constitution of the British nation, made in December 1936. At long last I am able to say a few words of my own. I have never wanted to withhold anything, but until now it has not been constitutionally possible for me to speak. But you must believe me when I tell you that I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do, without the help and support of the woman I love. So, this was about articles. And now we are going to our superlatives and comparatives. Superlatives and comparatives. We are going to talk about now. Just a moment. So, comparatives and superlatives. So, we need to read it once again. Yeah, to see comparatives and superlatives. So you probably know already the basic rules regarding comparative and superlative forms of adjectives and adverbs. So this group, this grammar will be mainly revision and consolidation. So maybe some of you can still mix up comparative and superlative forms. Yeah. For example, this is the older building in the town, etc. And make mistakes with the rules for forming comparatives and superlatives. So let's read the rule and then we will discuss the most common mistakes. So comparatives and superlatives. Comparing two things or actions. Yeah, we use comparatives. My sister is a bit taller than me. London is more expensive than Edinburgh. This test is less difficult than the last one. Olive oil is better for you than butter. You drive more slowly than me. Liverpool players worse today than last week. Sorry, Liverpool played worse today than last week. Flying isn't as flying isn't as comfortable as going by train. He doesn't smoke as much as she does. Your new car looks the same as the old one. So, regular comparative adjectives and adverbs. Hot, harder, big, bigger, you double G, remember? Easy, easier, modern, more modern, difficult, more difficult, carefully, more carefully. Irregular comparative adjectives or adverbs. Good, better, well, better. Bad, worse, badly, worse. Far, further. After then, or as, we can use an object pronoun me, him, her, etc., or a subject pronoun I, he, she plus auxiliary verb. For example, she's taller than me, or she's taller than I am, but not she's taller than I. This is a common mistake. About the superlatives. He's the tallest player in the team. Oslo is the most expensive capital city in Europe. This book is the least difficult to understand. She's the best student in the class. Who drives the most carefully in your family? That's the worst they've ever played. Form superlatives like comparatives but use est instead of er, and most, least instead of more, less. You normally use the before superlatives, but you can also use possessive adjectives, for example, my best friend, their most famous song. So, typical mistakes include always using more and most, more big, the most fast, etc. Yeah, you have to change the adverb or adjective. The next mistake, mixing up comparative and superlative forms. For example, this is the older building in the town. Not right. The other mistake, confusing as and then. For example, the train isn't as cheap than the bus. Yeah, the train isn't as cheap as the bus. The next mistake, omission of the definite article. His best player in the team. Yeah, there is missed here. Confusing adjectives and adverbs. For example, you drive more quick than me. Yeah, we need adverb here, quickly. So, and the exercises to practice, which we need to rotate also. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So we need in 2C A complete with one word. For example, she's much more intelligent than her brother. He's not as clever as he thinks he is. It's the best look I've read. Ah, sorry. 2. It's the best book I've read for a long time. 3. The journey took longer than we expected. 4. I think it was the saddest film I've ever seen. 5. Is Texas the biggest state in the USA? 6. He's the most selfish person I've ever met. 7. Your watch is the same as mine. 8. My father speaks more quickly than I do. 9. We don't go swimming as often as we did before. 10. Her brother's about 10 and she's a year younger than him. In the exercise B, you have to complete with the comparative or superlative of the bold word. Mexican food is much spicier than American food. It's hotter than it was this time last year. Jan's the most competitive of all my sisters. He's the laziest person in the office. He looks much better with shorter hair. I sat next to the most boring person at the party. Could we meet a bit earlier tomorrow? It was the worst film I've seen this year. Sue is the most ambitious member of my family. The safest way to travel is by train. The beach was further from the hotel than we expected. So, this was about comparatives and superlatives for adjectives and adverbs. So the next topic of our video lesson is quantifiers. So, and for this I propose some more material. Yeah, we are going to read the text, which will help us understand better, which we need to rotate again. Yeah. So, are you happy with your work-life balance? Yeah. So, which situation is most typical for you? Yeah. So, let's read. Then, project manager, software company, Boston, USA. 1. I'm not happy with my work life balance at all. I work at least 50 or 60 hours a week, so I don't have any time, no time at all for myself or to see my children. What is the right? Any time or no time. So I don't have any time. I communicate with my wife by leaving messages on the fridge. We hardly ever see each other because we work different hours and I never have time to see my friends or keep fit. Also, I eat very badly because my lunch hour, about 10 minutes, isn't long enough for me to have a proper meal. Okay, I earn a lot of money, but I don't have enough time. Is it worth it? So, and the next two people are going to speak, and we are going to read about them. Emily, lawyer, Paris, France. I didn't used to have much time for anything because I was working too much. No, too many hours, 45 or more a week. But then here in France, the government decided that people should only work 35 hours a week. Nowadays, I have plenty of time for myself. I play tennis 2 evenings a week and I finish work at lunchtime on Friday, so I can have long weekends. I am much happier. I think when you have time to enjoy your personal life, you work much better. And Nayuha, store assistant in Tokyo, Japan. Yes, I'm happy with it because I've chosen a lifestyle that I like and that gives me quite a lot of free time. But my father, on the other hand, works more than 70 hours a week for a car company, which I think is madness. Lots of Japanese people do the same. There is an expression in Japanese, karoshi, which means dying because you work too hard. A lot of people in Japan get ill or die because they work too much. I think my generation is different. We don't want our lives to be ruled by work. I worked a few hours a day in a store that gives me enough money to live. I spend the rest of my time seeing my friends and playing baseball. So, now we know the correct phrases and we can go to the rules. Well, our rules. Yeah, this is Again, page to be rotated. Yeah, quantifiers. Yeah, so large quantifiers for large quantities. They have a lot of money. She has lots of friends. He eats a lot. There aren't many cafes near here. Do you watch much TV? Don't run, we have plenty of time. So we need to use a lot of, lots of in positive sentences. Use a lot when there is no noun. For example, he talks a lot. Much, many, we use for normally negative sentences and questions, but a lot of can also be used. Use plenty of in positive sentences to mean as much as we need or more. Lots of is a colloquial equivalent of a lot of. Yeah, be careful not to say a lots of. So small quantities. Do you want some ice cream? Just a little. The town only has a few cinemas. Hurry up, we have very little time. I have very few close friends. Use little plus uncountable nouns, few plus plural countable nouns. A little and a few means some, but not at all, not a lot. Very little and very few, not much, not many. Yeah. So a little and very little are quite different in meaning. The second is more negative, yeah, the little, very little. The same applies to a few and very few. Zero quantity. Zero quantity. There isn't any room in the car. There is no room in the car. How much money do you have? None. You need to use any for zero quantity with a negative verb. You need to use no with a positive verb. Use none without a noun in short answers. Yeah. So not any is the most common way to talk about zero quantities. For example, I don't have any money. There isn't any milk. However, you can also use no plus noun after there is and have. For example, there is no milk. None is a pronoun, so is used on its own. For example, is there any milk? No, I'm afraid there is none left. More than you need or want, and less than you need. I don't like this city, it's too big. There is too much traffic. There are too many tourists. There aren't enough parks. The buses aren't frequent enough. You need to use to plus adjective, too much plus uncountable noun, too many plus plural countable noun, and you need to use enough before a noun but after an adjective. So typical mistakes are using too much plus an adjective. I'm too much busy. The position of enough. I'm not enough tall to open the cupboard. Mispronouncing enough. Some nationalities, like Russians, can confuse plenty of and full of because of our language. Yeah. Okay. So, and we have some exercises here. Let's do them. It's the first exercise. You need to circle the correct answer and tick if both answers are possible. For example, I think this restaurant is too expensive. 1. The There are too many people in my salsa class. 2. Nobody likes him. He has very few friends. 3. We've had a lot of rain recently. We've had lots of rain recently. 4. There aren't enough car parks in the city center. 5. I have no time. I don't have any time. 6. He works a lot. He works much, at least 10 hours a day. A lot is better. 7. Do you speak French? Yes, a little. 8. I don't have time. I don't have any time for myself. In B, right or wrong, and we need to correct the wrong sentences. For example, she drives too much fast. She drives too fast. Slow down, we have plenty time. Slow down, we have plenty of time. We have too many work at the moment. We have too much work at the moment. 3. I think I made a few mistakes in the letter. Correct. 4. He isn't enough old to understand. He isn't old enough to understand. 5. We can't go tomorrow. We are too busy. Correct. 6. We have very little time to do this. Correct. 7. How many eggs are there? Any? Not correct. None. 8. He is retired, so he has much free time. Not correct. He's retired, so he has a lot of time. He's retired, so he has lots of time. So, this was the practice for quantifiers. And I'm going to speak Russian now. Дорогие ученики 11 класса, сейчас одну секундочку. Когда вы будете выполнять домашнее задание, прошу вас использовать для этого форму, которая находится на сайте нашей домашней школы. Если вам нужно вставить пропущенные слова, в форму вы только вписываете эти пропущенные слова или варианты ответов. Конечно же, если задание сделать перевод, то вы полностью перевод. Текст перевода вставляете в эту форму. И большая просьба присылать отсканированные только на одной странице в таком виде, что можно было прочитать, что есть определенная резкость. И также вы, конечно, можете дома писать все в тетрадках, но лучше использовать нашу форму, чтобы быстрее были проставлены оценки и можно было эффективнее использовать эти материалы для нашей следующей консультации, которая состоится через неделю. Большое спасибо за внимание. До свидания.